It's really rare these days for a promotional piece or a promotional trailer to really get me excited or just blow me away in general, but today that phenomenon happened. I straight blew a load when I saw this promotional piece for Supergirl on CW. This whole thing just looks like a project put on by a 7th grade middle school's arts and crafts department. I'm gonna let the whole thing play first of all, and then we'll go back and analyze it scene by scene. And keep in mind, they are using this as the actual promotional piece to get you interested in the show.
The ones you love turn their back on you. That's pain. But you'll see when you suffer the way you made me suffer. You can't touch me without hurting yourself.
That's why he brought me.
We came prepared.
You can't intercept any of us now.
Don't be so sure.
Agent Blake? John, now!
Seen the Ark!
Now, if that full-throttle, high-octane, nuts-to-butts action does not have you on the edge of your seat, well then I just don't know what the fuck is wrong with you. Now, I've never seen Supergirl, I know nothing about the character, I know nothing about the show, but you bet your sweet little asshole I'm about to learn, because this shit makes me want to dive in with both feet.
The ones you love turn their back on you. That's pain.
Now, I thought it'd be fun to go back to the trailer and analyze it scene by scene. So it starts with Dragon Ball Evolution's Piccolo saying some super emo shit. "Oh, you don't know the real meaning of pain. My family's turned their back on me, and now I listen to Pierce the Veil in the dark while writing in my diary. Ooh."
But you'll see when you suffer the way you made me suffer. You can't touch me with...
Yeah, this shit here just looks like a cutscene straight out of Mortal Kombat 4 on the Nintendo 64. It looks like a Halloween trick-or-treater standing in front of a green screen while a shitty YouTuber tried to very haphazardly edit them into a scene for a skit they were making in 2009. Also, I'm gonna critique the costuming here. It's not just shitty special effects, literally everything in this scene is fucking awful. The villain just looks super fucking goofy. He looks like a school shooter from outer space. His fucking stupid cape looks like a shag carpet dipped in motor oil. It's just top to bottom a horrible villain design. And it really does just look like a stock 3D asset that they decided to copy and paste onto the show here. It just looks low quality. But you know what's not low quality? The streams I do at twitch.tv/moistcritical. Come check that shit out, baby.
Without hurting yourself.
That's why he brought me.
There's more cuts in this than there is in most Liam Neeson movies. The shit's jarring and disorienting. But from the split second of subliminal images I could pick up on, I was able to deduce that Supergirl was disguising herself as a construction worker, and then she deactivated her cloaking device to deliver a justice fist directly to the left cheek of the evil Cyberman as he was yanked back via cord. Oftentimes when you see cord acrobatics and shit in movies, they try and hide that it's a cord, but here it's that, like, they kind of embrace it. There's no weight to the punch, but disregarding the punch and the lack of physics in the show, why did the construction worker disguise work in the first place? The supervillain is monologuing in front of one of the main characters in what seems to be an isolated area, but for some reason he lets a construction worker in the front row seat to hear his evil plans. Why? I mean, you know, ideally you would want no one to hear your evil plans unless you've been caught. So why is he just letting some rogue construction worker sit there and listen? Turns out it's Supergirl and she punches him, but still, his planning makes no sense. He would have killed that construction worker or very politely asked him to leave, but he did neither of those things.
We came prepared.
You can't intercept any of us now.
Don't be so sure.
Agent Blake?
Now this Power Rangers battle is really starting to heat up here. There's a lot to digest. All of a sudden you got the fucking Avengers portaling in out of nowhere, entering this corporeal dimension, and now they're about to arrest the guy. One girl brags about how he can no longer intercept them, but then he does intercept the football pass and he mind controls that other girl and she shoots at them. But now I have to wonder if this is all like clipped up out of context and mashed together in this phase montage for the show, or if this is the actual tempo and the actual speed the show goes at, because if so, what the fuck were the Galactic Police plan here? We're gonna try and arrest the man with mind control. Hopefully he won't try and mind control us. Fuck, he mind controlled Beth. Like, you know, they didn't come here with any protection. They didn't have Magneto's helmet on to prevent anything like this. They just came here raw and no rubber, and then one of them gets mind controlled. It's just I'm a little confused. I imagine maybe in the show it'll make a little more sense, but as it stands right now for promoting this, it leaves a lot of questions.
John, now!
Supergirl obviously intercepts the bullet, and then she fires a laser beam at her friend, and I have to wonder how that didn't split her in half, because she's supposed to be the equivalent of Superman or be stronger than Superman, and for some reason her laser just kind of love taps the gun out of her hand as kind of just like an inconvenience, more like a wasp sting than a fucking eye laser. But she disarms her friend, and then all of a sudden the main guy we saw in the beginning fires like a Ghostbusters proton beam at our main villain, who then makes himself intangible, fucking Naruto Toby style, and then fades away by throwing some kind of portal device underneath him. I'm really not sure. But either way, this display of highly talented special effects departments coupled with incredible storytelling and acting, I imagine will lead to one of my favorite shows on CW. And trust me, CW's got some real good bangers when it comes to shit television. This may take the cake. I'm excited to start watching, and hats off to the Supergirl CW promotional team, because this worked like a fucking charm. That's it. See ya. I finally watched Zack Snyder's new movie, Rebel Moon, Part 1, A Child of Fire. But I promise you, the only fire this movie offers is the one that's going to be ignited in your soul with rage over how awful it is and how angry it makes you for wasting over 130 minutes of your life. Do you remember all that hoopla a couple weeks ago where big fans of Zack Snyder were screaming and shouting from the rooftops about how unfair it is that Rebel Moon Part 1 has a low Rotten Tomatoes scores from critics? Then the claim started floating around that Rebel Moon was the victim of review bombing, so all the reviews that were being posted weren't genuine or reliable whatsoever, so you couldn't take the Rotten Tomatoes score as an indicator of it being bad, because it's actually extremely good, and that the critics' reviews here are just baloney. Well, that's a bunch of cope right there. That is the biggest lie ever told since me trying to pretend I was 6 feet tall on Tinder. This movie shouldn't even have a 24% on Rotten Tomatoes. That seems high. That is generous. How it has a 65% audience score is an affront to God himself, because this is not a good movie no matter how you spin it. It is extraordinarily derivative of just Star Wars itself, to the point where it almost feels like it was supposed to be satirical of Star Wars, but if it was created by someone going through a really edgy phase in their life. I hate to draw the immediate and obvious connection to Star Wars, but it's very clear that had a huge influence here, because there are so many plot elements that are directly shared with Star Wars, as well as just blatantly having a lightsaber ripoff. It's so shameless. There is a character in this movie that uses lightsabers. Come on. It's right in your face. Zack Snyder is pounding his meat into your mouth, letting you know that this is Star Wars fanfic done really poorly. Now, as I understand it, this was something Zack Snyder tried to pitch for quite a while, and was constantly turned down until recently, where he was given the means to make it. And man, it should have stayed in the drafts. This should not have made it to the screen whatsoever. So let's dive in. Let's start with its disjointed plot and nonsensical subplots that it tries to introduce here. Now, I'm going to give you a brief synopsis, and it's going to sound really familiar to some property you've seen in the past, so if there's any copyright attorneys in here, you might start sweating when hearing this. There's an evil intergalactic empire that wants to control the whole galaxy, and they're bad news, Buster. You don't want them paying you a visit, because shit will pop off. And if things don't go their way on the planets they visit, if they don't want to serve the way that they think the planet should serve them, they have no hesitation blowing the planet up with their low orbit beams that will explode the planet. Our protagonist is one of the most fearsome warriors that empire had ever produced, but she left that life behind in order to live a life of solitude on an isolated planet elsewhere. But unfortunately, the ghosts from the past pay her a visit. The empire comes through, and in doing so, they cause a ruckus on this new planet that she's trying to call home, and thus she decides to rise up and lead a rebellion against this evil empire that she left so long ago. That's the bare bones of it. I don't even really care if it's like a super simple plot, to be honest, because you can make that work as long as you fill it with an interesting world and interesting characters, neither of which this movie successfully accomplishes. So, its characters are the most soulless I think I've ever seen in a sci-fi movie. They are so bland and emotionless. They don't have a personality at all. Zack Snyder forgot to write that. And he forgot to write the characters bonding with each other. So the whole film is basically just collecting new members for the rebellion for the most part. And when they do so, they join very easily. It doesn't take much convincing at all. It's not really feeling earned when they join. And when they're there, you don't ever see them interact with each other. They're all basically just fucking strangers to one another. I don't know how you can make a movie like this and forget the most important part, which is showcasing character bonding and building relationships. It doesn't even attempt to do that in any way. But anyway, these characters really don't have any kind of defining personality traits whatsoever. In fact, they all kind of share the exact same traits. They're all stoic, they're all brooding, and they're all mad all the time. Like, and I don't even mean like outwardly mad, like screaming or anything. They don't even get that emotional. They're just always like angry, like wearing a big frown on their face because it's all so grim and dark in this universe. The only one of their crew that even somewhat has a personality is Kai. And he basically just becomes their chauffeur. He drives them around to collect new members for the rebellion. And that's kind of his whole role, and he sometimes makes some wise cracks. Thus, you can make an argument that there is at least a semblance of a personality to him, whereas everybody else has nothing. It's so weird how you could make a cast of characters this uninteresting. And what's wild is, you don't even get to see them use their expertise. For example, one of the people that join the rebellion is supposed to be this hotshot general. And the only reason you even know that this guy's a big deal is because when they're reflecting, the Empire's reflecting on this mounting rebellion, one of the big bad guys says, and then they have General Tiberius, I think is what it was. I'm already forgetting the names because, again, the characters are just not interesting. But he's like, General Tiberius is with them? You mean the genius general? One of our finest generals ever? And it's like, oh, okay, so he's a big deal. But he never uses that expertise at all when he joins the crew. He doesn't do anything. He doesn't do anything at all. Really, none of the characters do for the most part. So there's like a prince that joins, has no role to play in this group whatsoever, and him being a prince has no role to play in this whatsoever. The general doesn't use any of his expertise. Like, it just, they have all these like subplots and all these like tiddlywinks of lore that never go anywhere, and they kind of just serve as like bench players behind our main character as well as the main farmer that joins them. And the main farmer, like, he is probably the most personality-less out of all of them. So much bad shit happens to him, and some of it is like actually directly his fault, and he just sits there just super stone cold stone face, and sometimes he'll do this. And that's it. Like, he doesn't, there's no depth to any of these characters. They don't flesh them out. They don't do anything with them. It's basically just like having action figures in your movie. And then occasionally Zack Snyder decides he wants to play with them, so he'll make some of the lamest action sequences you'll ever fucking see. He has this obsession with slow motion for this movie. I swear to God, at least 45 minutes of this film's runtime is dedicated to slow-mo shots. And they're so lame. It's like the most boring things you could ever use slow-mo for. One of them, I shit you not, is a character jogging. And he's jogging. And he's jogging. And he's jogging. And he's jogging. And then he finally jumps onto the back of a bird that threw him off. Like, it's just so, like, why slow-mo that? Slow-mo the jump. Don't slow-mo the entire jog up there. It is agonizing. Oh my God, it was miserable. I felt like I was in some kind of fucking time vortex. Like, just, it was actually, I actually felt like Zack Snyder wanted to personally offend me and waste my time with how much slow-mo he puts in here. You have to really fuck up to make slow motion boring. And somehow he pulls it off. Slow-mo has always been cool. It will always be cool when it comes to action moments. But he uses it for the worst action. Like, another good example. There is a slow-mo action sequence where our main character is running and sometimes firing. And that's it. Like, there's sometimes some, like, lasers going by her, but she doesn't do anything else. It's, again, just slow-mo of her running through these lasers with the occasional shot being fired, which you don't even see hitting anyone, and then eventually she slides under something. Why slow-mo that? That would be a lot more intense if you had that going at normal speed. She's dodging all of these lasers, it's really high stakes, it's really intense. This thing's collapsing and now she needs to slide to beat it. And she slides and just barely narrowly gets through there. That'd be much better than this 3-minute sequence of her running towards that thing with like a few lasers zipping by her and occasionally her pulling the trigger. It's just, why slow-mo some of these things? I don't get it. I really don't. It feels like when you back were in school for a summer book report and you needed to reach the word limit, so you just start typing a bunch of mumbo-jumbled gobbledygook. That's what I feel like he used slow-mo here for, just to pad the runtime a bit longer, because I have no other explanation for it. But anyway, we'll move on from the lackluster action. I don't think it's all bad. There are some cool moments here, visually and in the action. And you know what the cool action moments have in common? They're not fucking slow motion. Like, their non-slow motion action was so much better than the sequences that they tried to slow down. So they should have worked more on that a bit. But there are a few cool moments. Some of the planets they visit are visually interesting. Like, I can really see Zack Snyder had this wild imagination that he wanted to bring to life, but didn't really know how. So it's kind of just this disjointed mess of visiting a bunch of places in Zack Snyder's brain with no real reason for them to be there narratively that feels rewarding or earned. So, like, there's this Spider Woman who eventually fights the lightsaber wielder, which I think is a really cool concept and a really cool idea. And in fact, the scene between them is pretty good, but the actual writing of it is terrible. The spider creature has a couple of minutes to try and make her like a sympathetic character, and then the lightsaber wielder who does join the rebellion has a couple of minutes to try and flesh her out in some way, and then they fight. And then that's it. We never really see the lightsaber character talk to anybody else ever again, so we get nothing else from the lightsaber character ever. The spider creature's dead. I guess spoilers, but it's not an important character anyway. It's just a throwaway, just to showcase some lightsaber action. And it's like, okay, you had this cool visual idea here with the spider creature fighting the lightsaber wielder. You needed something more to tie it together, because at the end of the day, like, this was kind of flashy and kind of nice, but there's no real substance there. We don't really get anything out of it for the rest of the film, and it's never addressed ever again in the film, so what the fuck did we really do this for? And there's a couple other moments like that where I'm like, damn, this is kind of a cool place they're visiting, this is a cool atmosphere. We spend 4 minutes there, never to come back, never to address any of it again, and the character that we got in the rebellion from it never says another word to anybody in the crew. So what a waste of time that was. And that's just what the whole movie feels like, a waste of time. There is nothing worthwhile in Rebel Moon Part 1. It doesn't set anything up that makes me like biting at my nails waiting to see what happens in Part 2. The villain super sucks. The villain is just cartoonishly evil, and that's his only trait, really. He doesn't have any depth to him either. Nobody and nothing does. Even the main character, the way that they try and write depth to her is by her monologuing her past, and then them showing the flashbacks. In slow motion, of course, obviously. But outside of her monologues, she doesn't do anything else besides just try and drive a hard bargain for people to join her rebellion. And by hard bargain, I mean she literally asks a couple of times, and then usually they say yes. Or she'll do like a very simple chore, and then they'll join. Like, it just feels so lame and underwhelming. I do think the universe has potential. Like, I do think they set up a pretty cool universe, and they introduce an interesting plot element that hasn't been explored in Part 1 at all when it comes to, like, potentially breathing life back into creatures, and potentially magic. And that could be pretty cool if this film was successful at all in generating any type of interest in seeing it explored more. I just don't know who would sit down and watch this and care about any of the characters at all. Like, again, they don't have personality. This whole movie is emotionless. It's all muted. There's a death amongst the rebel crew, and I guarantee there's not a single person out there that cared, because we had only met that character like 20 minutes ago. He only had like 3 or 4 lines in total, really, before he died, like after joining the crew. So it has no impact whatsoever. There's no weight to it. And that's just kind of the whole movie. And I also feel like the movie itself has an identity crisis because it tries so hard to be dark and gritty, but it's also very clearly aimed at a PG-13 rating because there's no blood or anything like that, and it pulls all of its punches. So our big evil guy He has this big stick that he hits people with and kills them with it, but when he hits them with it, after the initial hit, it'll usually cut away to just a close-up of him slamming it down, and then it's implied they are dead because of it. Well, it's not implied, like they are dead because of it, but they don't show anything. Like, it doesn't actually go through with the dark and gritty tone. It pulls its feet out of the pool at the last second. So the whole film just really feels so messy. It really feels like all this film wanted to do was get to things that Zack Snyder thought would look cool, but he didn't really know how to write it in a way that makes sense to get there. So he said, fuck it, we'll just do it anyway. We'll do it live. And that's what it is. It's just this, you know, you go here, recruit them, and leave. And while you're doing the going there and recruiting them, you look at something cool. Maybe there's a cool scene that unfolds, like riding a griffin or something, and then you immediately leave, and then that character that joins you never hear from again. It's just a bad movie, really. Like, there's just not a whole lot that's good about it. I think Zack Snyder has some cool ideas, but he needs someone to really fine-tune that shit and put good writing behind the ideas. So, yeah. Rebel Moon, Part 1, Child of Fire. It is pretty bad. I'd say it's about as bad as everyone's saying that it is. That's about it. So, yeah. Monkey Man is a movie that definitely piqued my curiosity from its very first trailer for a couple reasons. One, the obvious, I'm a sucker for revenge movies, and this looked like a really good one with a lot of potential. Two, I'm a big fan of Dev Patel's work, and this is his directorial debut. And three, the name, Monkey Man. It's what my mom used to call me when I was misbehaving as a young boy. She'd either call me Monkey Man or Silly McGillicuddy. So the name had a smile on my face. And then also, this film has a pretty interesting story behind its production to a certain extent. So apparently this was just going to go straight to streaming services, and according to a couple headlines, was dead in the water, which I think is very exaggeratory and doom and gloom for no reason other than a couple of fucking curiosity clicks. But until Jordan Peele came aboard, this wasn't even going to see a theatrical release. But Jordan Peele apparently liked the movie so much that he lobbied for it hard and actually got it a big deal and then got it as a theatrical release. And I just think that's pretty cool. I think that's a big old W. So I just got back from seeing the film and I've got a lot of thoughts on it. First of all, I know most people are going to this film expecting it to be a John Wick type movie. And to a certain extent, it kind of is. Like, it definitely has some John Wick DNA in there, and it's self-aware of that. There's even a line in the film that gets a little meta, pointing out a John Wick reference. But it's not quite like that. It's definitely a bit different and tries to stand on its own 2 feet with its own unique identity. And for the most part, it hits more than it misses. The action is extraordinary, it's gory, it's over the top, it's exciting. Dev Patel does a great fucking job as the lead role in here. It's a fun story too that I thought was pretty creative. And overall, I really do think it's a great movie, but it's held back by its biggest miss. A huge flub here. A fumble. Monkey Man unfortunately commits the unforgivable sin of shaky cam. And shaky cam doesn't even adequately describe just how shaky the camera is when it comes to its action sequences in this film. It's brutal. It's disorienting. It's what I imagine getting a concussion must feel like when you're first coming to and getting reacclimated to the world around you. It's like all the camera operators were on crack while also having a sugar rush boofing Coca-Cola and chugging down Jolly Ranchers. The camera's just like always doing this. It's like in an invisible washing machine, like perpetually caught in a fucking tornado or something. It just takes all of the impact out of the action sequences. It completely interrupts the flow of the action, derails that train, and makes it really hard for you to even process what you're looking at because the camera is just all over the place. The choreography on all of the action is extremely well done. It's just a shame that the camera didn't just get a chance to sit there and show us. Instead, it felt like the camera ops are the ones that were getting beat up because the camera's fucking jiggling everywhere all the time. It's just an outrageous amount of shaky cam to it that really does take away so much from otherwise amazing action sequences. This is something I don't usually do when watching a movie, but I actually wrote down notes on this, or at least a big note on this, because the camera work was really infuriating because they did such a great job with all of these action set pieces. The choreography is stellar. They really had a passion for delivering really great action moments, but then they filmed it really poorly. Like, it is framed badly. So I wrote down, Monkey Man has way too many close-ups and cutaways. It makes it hard to see what's going on, coupled with the shaky camera that makes it feel like you're playing a video game with maxed motion blur. And that's exactly what it does feel like, because not only is it the shaky cam, but this film has so many close-ups. It's like you're looking at it through a goddamn microscope in anatomy and physiology class. Like, I looked at a couple other reviews to make sure I wasn't just on the stupid juice, make sure I'm not a fucking crazy person that escaped Arkham Asylum here. And some of the other reviews are saying the same thing, that it actually feels claustrophobic because of how many close-ups there are. And they're 100% right. It makes it so you can't even tell the environment they're in and the size of it, like the scale is completely lost because everything is a close-up and everything keeps cutting away so rapidly during these action sequences and then going right into another close-up while shaking. It's really hard to process what exactly is happening most of the time. The first half of the film is definitely the worst when it comes to that part. The second half, I don't know what happened, but they filmed like the last 30 minutes of action in a pretty different way, like almost entirely different. It's like they had a whole different camera crew come in to shoot those sequences, and they are far, far better. The last 30 minutes I think are spectacular. They finally get camera operators that can sit still. They actually have some wide shots where you can actually digest the action that's going on here. He's fighting through hordes of enemies, doing some really cool fucking Mortal Kombat level fatalities on them. They even have a really good soundtrack to accompany it that I feel was heavily inspired by Doom. You got those fat chugs, some big chugs. You even have like some screaming to the music, which is cool too. They have like some growls in there, and it's really fucking awesome just watching him annihilate all of these dudes in hand-to-hand combat. It's flashy, it's over the top, improvised weapons. He's stabbing them with forks, stabbing them with little tiny knives, fucking poking their eyes out, using a tray to cut someone's thumb off, just like an actual dinner tray, somehow cuts someone's thumb off because he swings it so hard. All accompanied with this great music. Oh, it was fire. And no shaky cam for those parts, just like a tracking cam if they're following him around the room. So much better. The way they did the action at the end is so much better than the way they did it for the first half. I don't know what changed. Maybe someone around there was like, hey guys, let's maybe mix it up for this. And I'm so glad they did because I really appreciated that. And I still appreciated the movie. I still think it's a really good movie overall. But man, I have just gotta point out the camera work for the action sequences being a huge letdown. I really thought we were through this age of shaky cam. That was prevalent for a while. Everyone hated it. So for the last couple of years, we hadn't really seen a ton of shaky cam action movies. And then this one really brings it back in a big way, unfortunately. But even in spite of that, it still is really good. And the main reason is because this movie is not just action. Like I said, it's more than just a revenge film. It's very much an emotional movie that does get a lot deeper than that. Like, it's not just start to finish, full throttle, non-stop action where he's just going through fucking horde mode here with enemies, waves coming after him that he beats the shit out of. That happens a lot, but there is a lot of story that's woven throughout the film as well. There is an entire, like, middle section of the movie that's dedicated to just talking and going through our main character and how he got to this point, what he's fighting for, why, how he's going to... I don't want to get into any spoilers or anything, but there's more world building and story than just action and revenge. And I appreciate that because I think it was done well. But yeah, it is still pretty upsetting that the shaky cam was here in such a big way, because without the shaky cam, I think this movie is up there with some of the best revenge movies ever. Like, I really think it had the potential to be that good. And I think going forward, if Dev Patel continues to pursue directing and making movies in this style, I think it's only up from here, and he will continue to perfect this craft. He's clearly got a huge talent for it, so I'm really excited to see what else he makes in the future. This is an incredible start to his directorial career, and I'm excited to see where it goes. So if I was to plug Monkey Man in the Moist Meter, I'd give it like a comfortable 80%. I did enjoy it overall. Like, I'm not even going to say I was disappointed or anything, because I did have a lot of fun watching it. I think it's great. But man, just get rid of the shaky cam ASAP. Like, scrap the shaky cam forever. Like, I don't know how that even came about. The shaky cam has the worst reputation in all of cinema. So let's keep it that way. Just retire shaky cam forever, and we'll all be happier for it. So yeah, that's about it. Good movie. See ya. Rejoice, it's finally here. Rebel Moon Part 2. The movie no one's been waiting for. A sequel to the movie nobody liked. And man, if you can believe it, somehow part 2 is even worse than part 1. Somehow, every single complaint people had about the first Rebel Moon is present in the second, and even worse. Now, granted, there hasn't been a long gap between part 1 and part 2, so it's not like he went back and started fixing things in this movie, I imagine, after reception to the first one. It was probably already locked and loaded. But man, it is crazy how for 2 movies, no one sat Zack Snyder down and said, "Brother, this stinks." Like, he's got a couple of good ideas, he's got a couple of good shots, and, like, a decent vision on, like, how things could be cool on screen. But, oh my god, it is a fucking disaster of storytelling. And not only that, it's a disaster on, like, the most basic levels of movie making. First of all, the characters in this movie are more flat than this note I'm about to hit. He's had 2 films to work with these characters, and in the first one there was no depth to them whatsoever. There was less depth to the characters in the first Rebel Moon than a goddamn kiddie pool. And somehow in the second one, they're even more, like, shallow. How do you do that? How do you do that? You've had 2 movies to work with these characters, and I feel like I still know nothing about them. I am more familiar with the strangers in my Rainbow Six Siege solo queuing lobby when they talk to me in text chat than I am with the characters across 4.5 hours of watching Rebel Moon. I learn more about those strangers in solo queue than I have from the characters in these movies. I don't even remember any of their names. I only know the main characters' names, like Archelaus, or like the villain Atticus, or the robot James, which is a... I'll get to the James in a moment, but it's so weird. Zack Snyder fundamentally fails with 2 movies to do what most directors can accomplish in a single episode of a TV show, and that's make you care about some characters. And it's not for lack of trying. I actually made a note of this because I found it so laughably pathetic. He is just unable to write good characters or write a compelling story around them. He tried to give them some depth. I have to set the stage narratively. So this movie is all about, oh, super surprise, the big bad guy from Rebel Moon 1 isn't dead. We knew that. He's coming back. They have 5 days now to prepare the village and, you know, get the grain protected and have this big war that's going to unfold on this planet. So the movie is mainly just prepping for that. It's really fucking boring. It is a snooze fest. But there is a scene, like, right before they arrive to the war where one of the characters sits everyone down at the table and basically just says, "Look, we don't really know each other. Why don't we go around the room and tell each other a little bit about ourselves?" Like an actual icebreaker in middle school. So they go through their fucking generic sob stories, one by one. And I shit you not, every single one of these is about 10 to 12 minutes in length and entirely slow motion. All slow motion. This movie has at least 5 times as much slow motion as Rebel Moon Part 1, which had an criminal amount of slow motion. Zack Snyder needs to go to, like, a psychiatrist to figure out why he is obsessed with slow-mo. In the most unnecessary scenes ever. In Rebel Moon Part 1, there's an infamous scene that I pointed out where there's I think it's like a whole 2-minute sequence of a slow-mo jog from one of the characters. Like, slowed down to, like, 0.25 speed of him just jogging for so long. And in here, that's like half of the scenes. So in this moment, they're going around the room telling their generic sob stories, which suck. They are so poorly written. Side quests in the first Mass Effect with throwaway characters gave you more reasons to care than these do. So they're going around the room, they're telling their stories, each one's 10 to 12 minutes of all slow-mo, and it's supposed to be about confessing, so we get to learn about the real them. And it falls right on its fucking face. It became a joke. Like an actual joke. This was his attempt at trying to give the characters any level of depth. This is him fleshing them out. He can't do it. He can't write it. It's bad. So, since he was unsuccessful in giving these characters any real depth, no one cares about them. No one's going to know their name. I certainly didn't. So anytime the characters do something, which is rare because most of the characters do nothing here except for the main characters, but anytime they do, you kind of just roll your eyes like, oh, who is this and what are they doing? Why? And then if something happens to those characters, it doesn't matter because you don't know them. You haven't seen them do anything, so who gives a fuck? It takes all of the emotional weight off of every single scene that they're in. And I think somewhere along the way, he recognized that because at a certain point, characters just start telling you how you're supposed to feel about characters. So there's a scene where one of the villagers is giving the main cast, like the heroes, a certain item, and then explaining why she's giving them that item. And it's like, oh, for your bravery, your no-quit attitude, there's not a mean bone in your body, you always wear the nicest smile, and you got real stars in your eyes, champ, we love it here. And it's like, what the fuck do you mean? We've never even seen that from this character. What are you talking about? You also never seen this from the character. They haven't done anything. They haven't done shit. And you're talking about how they're like super strong, super nice, like an incredible warrior. You haven't fucking seen it. Nobody has. Like, they just start telling you what the character is supposed to be, but you never see it. They don't show you it. So it sucks. Like, what Zack Snyder needs is a talented writing team around him. Because like I said, he has some cool visions, and there are some good shots. But since everything around it is dog shit, the whole thing just becomes a toilet bowl of poop. Like, it just doesn't work. So all of the shots are just kind of moot. If he had a team of writers around him that kind of wrangled in his visions and like actually fleshed them out, I think he could have something here with Rebel Moon. But since it seems like he's only surrounded by a bunch of yes-men, we're gonna keep getting fed this slop, and it is slop. I don't know how Zack Snyder has like this cult following that he does that's brainwashed into just loving everything he makes. It's just so odd because under every possible spin of Rebel Moon, it's just bad. Like, there's no real arguments you can make for it being good. Even at the most basic level of action, it fucking fails at. It's boring. The action in Rebel Moon 1 was better, genuinely better, than what's here in Rebel Moon 2. Even though this one is all about a war. Like, how do you make a war movie this lame? It's just a bunch of people firing from the hip in slow-mo. So just a bunch of lasers, you know, beep booping all over the place. And you don't really get to see anything interesting. There's a fucking character that uses dual lightsabers. Like, how do you fumble that? That is the easiest recipe for just fun on screen, and still, her scenes with the dual lightsabers are terrible. She barely does anything with them. She does like a couple of moves like this and that and nothing else, and she loses like the entire time to just random grunts, and that's supposed to be like one of the main heroes there. You know, this ultimate warrior. It's just pathetic. Like, it is boring action. Aside from a couple of decent moments. Like, there's a couple of moments in these slow-mo sequences that I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. If it wasn't surrounded by 50 other minutes worth of slow-mo, this one actually probably would have stood out. I bet if you took the slow-mo out of this movie, you would have cut its runtime by about 40 minutes. And I'm not even really exaggerating. I actually think you would have taken a huge chunk out of this movie if those slow-mo scenes were just normal speed or just used more sporadically. It's baffling. It's truly nuts how much slow-mo is in this movie. Like, I can't overstate that. But yeah, it takes so much of the impact and intensity out of a lot of these fight scenes. So really nothing in this film lands. Like, actually nothing. Now, I mentioned the robot James earlier, and I think he is the best example for just how bad and how all over the place Zack Snyder's brain is with Rebel Moon. James is a robot who actually has something cool about him. He's got, I don't want to spoil it, but he's got an interesting element that isn't present in anything else in Rebel Moon. And instead of exploring that part, which they only briefly drop, they instead just sideline him to a character that wears antlers and is occasionally just in the background looking at things. That's his whole presence in Rebel Moon. All he does is like look at shit from the sidelines, and he's like, And then he eventually talks to our main character for like maybe a minute or two, and he reveals that really interesting piece of lore about him, and it's never addressed again. And instead, he pops up one more time in the middle of their climactic battle where he just, like a fucking turret, goes in a circle shooting people, and then he like punches a guy, and then blows up a tank, and then he's gone again until the end of the movie, and then he's wearing his antlers again. He's like, I think I might want to help. Clearly, he's trying to get James into the fold for the third movie, because apparently Zack Snyder wants to make 6 of these bitches. God only knows why. I have no idea why. They are terrible and looks like only getting worse. But because Zack Snyder's all over the place, he has so many different pots on the fire, he's losing track of them, is what it seems like. James is a character that was introduced in the first Rebel Moon that I thought could be interesting, only to be completely forgotten. And in this film, they bring him in pretty early, like they show you him, and I thought, oh, he's probably going to play a pretty decent role in this film. Only to be completely forgotten again until the end of the movie with that little scene with the main character and then his hero moment. And then he even strikes legitimately a hero pose, like an actual hero pose, superhero. So it's like Zack Snyder keeps forgetting where things are or what things are going on in these movies because he's probably too focused on how to put more fucking slow-mo in it. It's just so poorly done from top to bottom. I can't think of anything in this film that makes it worth watching. It's a slog. And even like what's supposed to be the big payoff with this massive battle sucks. It's boring. Anyway, I'm not going to keep ranting about Rebel Moon Part 2 here, but I do also want to mention something, the name Scargiver. So Rebel Moon Part 2 is called Scargiver, and do you want to know why? Because fuck you, that's why. He has these pretentious sounding names, and in the movie, the best I can gather, since it's not fully explored why they call her Scargiver, the best I can piece together is the main bad guy Atticus at one point says that he's going to show his face and bear the scar that she gave him. So I'm guessing it's him giving her the title of Scargiver, because in their final fight, which basically killed him and then he was brought back to life, he now has a scar from it. Genius. I could be wrong, but that's what I pieced together with the name. Everything about Rebel Moon is so fucking cringe, it's crazy. If I was to put it onto the moist meter, I'd probably give this puppy a comfortable 15%, I'd say. That's really about it. So yeah. 2024 has been a remarkable year for awful horror movies. Every single month we're getting a brand spanking new disaster of horror delivered to the big screen and being charged over $10 for, which should be criminal for movies that are this bad, like Tarot and now Strangers Chapter 1. It blows my mind just how frequently they're putting out these revolting messes. No matter how you look at this movie or how generous you try to be with it, there is nothing to like. It is a pile of dog shit. It's actually worse than that, because real dog shit, like the tangible poop, it's at least free. This is dog shit you're paying $10 to sit through and be bored and miserable. It's just... Point is, Strangers Chapter 1 isn't very good. I'm sure, no doubt, most of you were able to sniff that out. I was trying to be very subtle with my critique off rip, be unbiased, but it's just hard with how bad this movie was. And it's made worse by the fact that I really like The Strangers, the first movie from 2008. I actually think it's a classic. The second one, I didn't like nearly as much. I actually forgot it existed until I went back and saw that they actually had one from 2018, and I was like, oh, that's interesting, I must have missed it. And then I watched the trailer and I was like, nope, I saw it. I remember this now. It opened up a repressed memory. Anyway though, Strangers Chapter 1 is far and away the worst in the franchise here, and one of the worst horror movies of the year. I don't think it's worse than Tarot, but Tarot was genetically engineered to be the worst possible horror movie you could create. They had one of the writers for Moonfall direct that fucking thing. So it's gonna be really hard for any movie to be worse than Tarot this year, but this one certainly tried to give it a run for its money. Now, Strangers Chapter 1 has a really interesting story, not in the actual movie itself, because the story is complete trash, but they actually filmed an entire trilogy for Strangers, and I don't mean 2008 and 2018, I mean Strangers Chapter 1 is the start of their new trilogy that they've already filmed. Apparently they filmed all 3 movies, and they're going to be releasing this entire trilogy over the course of the next year. That's very ambitious, especially when you have something as weak as this to start with. I don't know how they're going to justify the existence of Chapter 2 or the final chapter, but I'd be lying if I said I wasn't curious now, because how could it possibly get better? I know it can't get worse. This is definitely the worst I think it can possibly be for The Strangers, but what could they do to make it better? I don't know. The film ends with a to be continued, and nobody wants to continue this, but now I have this morbid curiosity with where this might go. I have half a mind to expect this to start bringing in aliens and time travel or something. I think it's going to get really off the rails, but let me just talk about what makes this movie so bad. And I'll actually start with this quote from the director. "Nothing is too ambitious for me. If it had been a straight remake or sequel, I would have definitely passed, because at this point in my life, I wouldn't touch a classic like the original The Strangers." Hey pal, you just blow in from Stupid Town? What are you talking about? Strangers Chapter 1 is literally a one-to-one remake of the 2008 Strangers movie, except the characters are stupider, they're more shallow, like these are the dullest characters I've ever seen in a horror film, and that is saying something extraordinary, because I thought Tarot had the worst characters, but the two characters, the main characters here, are so unlikable and have no depth to them at all. Somehow Tarot characters had better depth. Like, what do you mean? That you didn't want to just make it a straight remake and you would have passed if that's what the assignment was. You did do that! Everything that was present in 2008 Strangers is present here, but worse. It's as if AI was tasked with recreating the Strangers 2008, and it just ChatGPT threw this together to try and make it a close emulation, but lost all of the soul and what made that one so good. This movie is that. If you've seen 2008 The Strangers, you've already seen The Strangers Chapter 1. It's the exact same story, the only thing that changes is it's an Airbnb. But everything else is completely intact, including some of like the iconic scares done one-to-one but worse. It loses all of the tension of the 2008 Strangers. It's trash. You did remake that movie. Whether or not you set out with that goal, ultimately that's what you delivered. The best thing I can say about Strangers Chapter 1 is that at least it's only 91 minutes. So it's nice and short. You get in there, you get frustrated, you get bored, you leave, and you forget about the movie entirely because it sucked. At least it's not long. So thank you for that, I guess. So the story revolves around a man and a woman. They've been dating for 5 years. The guy hasn't proposed to her, which is a plot point that really doesn't do anything. It never leads to anything except for like a single line here and there about that. They're deeply in love and they're on a trip. They're making their way out to Oregon, but they encounter some car trouble and they end up getting stranded in a place called Venus, Oregon, and they get directed to an Airbnb to stay for the night while they wait for a guy named Rudy to fix their car. And most people in this small town are real sketchy, so it puts one of the main characters on edge, the guy. I already forgot his name. That's why I'm just referring to him as the guy. I actually don't remember their names, and I really don't feel like looking it up because it's not even worth remembering their names. So the guy and his girlfriend, they go into a diner because they're hungry. And the guy immediately just starts rolling a 1 on every charisma check. So everyone he interacts with for the entire first half of the movie ends up hating him because he tries to be like quippy with everyone and nobody likes it. So anytime he makes like a little quip, like for example, one of the diner waitresses said like, "Oh, you've been dating for 5 years? Why haven't you put a ring on it yet? What are you waiting for?" And he goes, "Well, right now I'm waiting on my turkey melt." And nobody laughs, so he just says, "Tough crowd." And he does that like 6 fucking times. He's so annoying, and every character hates him. This guy has negative charisma in his stats. So, anyway, whatever. Point is, he's unlikable by everyone in the movie, and everyone watching the movie too, because he has nothing to do. Like, he's not interesting. He has no real writing around him. He is just this hollow character that spits out a couple of bad quips and makes terribly stupid decisions. So, they're now staying at this Airbnb, and things are getting a little weird because there's someone that knocks on the door. They're banging on the door and they're asking for a Tamara. They're like, "Not here. Go away, weirdo." So they go away, and they come back again. "Where's Tamara?" "Hey, I already told you there's no Tamara here. You fucking scram. Take a hike." And him and his girlfriend, they're like trying to make the best out of this situation. She seems to really like it. And the guy takes his 6-pack of beer and he tries to put it in the fridge. He's like, "Damn, fridge isn't working." So he takes it out, and then his girlfriend finds a number to call if they need assistance with anything for the Airbnb owner. And I shit you not, it's like 1 a.m. And she grabs this number and calls the Airbnb owner to leave a message to send someone out to fix the fucking refrigerator at 1 a.m. so they could cool their beer. What an inconsiderate guest. Why would you do that? You're there for like maybe 6 hours. Why are you going to have someone come out at 1 a.m. to fix your fucking refrigerator so your boyfriend can put beer in it? But they end up just drinking all 6 beers anyway without them being cold. Like, it's so dumb. This is so stupid. I'm all over the place in breaking this down because this movie just really sucks and there's a lot I want to complain about. But, okay, back to that person knocking on the door. Eventually, the boyfriend realizes that he doesn't have his inhaler. His girlfriend says that she forgot to put it in the car when they got to the Airbnb because someone drove them there. And he's like, "All right, that's fine. I'll just scoot back into town on this motorcycle I saw outside." So this Airbnb has a motorcycle. I want you to make a very strong note of that. A working motorcycle that the boyfriend, with no trouble whatsoever, takes into town, which is like 5 miles away or something like that. So he goes to get his inhaler, and she is now left alone in the house, and creepy stuff's happening. One of the strangers is singing "Rockabye Baby." Like, all of the cliches you can possibly imagine for a horror movie are in this movie. Every single possible horror movie cliche. And they're done so much worse than you've ever seen them done before. So she's getting, like, on edge. You know, she's hearing these things, and you see, like, oh, the stranger creepy people are standing behind her, and she doesn't see them, but we see them. Whoa, spooky, frightening, and then jump scares out the wazoo. And it eventually culminates with them turning the power off, and she's got her phone flashlight out, and she sees one of the strangers in her mask standing right in front of her, so she runs upstairs and closes herself in, and then her boyfriend zooms back around on his motorcycle. He's got his inhaler, and he's got a cheeseburger. Well, I also want to make note, while he was in town, he actually encountered some not weird people, because the town was all sketchy. They were, like, really nervous around, you know, outsiders, but when he went back into town, everyone was super friendly, like normal young people. And they were talking like, hey, why don't you just, like, hang out with us? And he's like, nah, I gotta get back to the house. So I want to make that clear, that there are normal people there. He goes back to the house with the inhaler and a cheeseburger, and he's like, hey, what's going on, lady? What are you sitting on the floor for? What's going on, girlfriend? That's so weird. And she's like, no, there's someone in the house. I saw someone standing in the house. And he's like, someone in the house? Really? Have you been smoking? I shit you not. He says, have you been smoking? And she's like, well, yeah, a little bit. And he's like, show me where this person was standing. So she takes him downstairs to where the stranger in the mask, like, frightened her. And then he looks around and he sees a picture on a wall of a clown. And he's like, oh, I know what happened here. Does this look familiar? And he does this in front of her, blocking the clown photo and then unblocking it. And he's like, this is what you saw. It wasn't somebody standing in this house. You just saw the picture of the clown. And you're just so high that you fucked up. And then he goes, the Freaky Brothers is strong stuff. That's a line in the movie. He says the Freaky Brothers is strong stuff, referring to what she was smoking. I have to imagine the director was on the Freaky Brothers when he was making this movie, because it is so fucking stupid. It is so fucking stupid. How in the world would you be like, hey, listen, it was definitely this picture you saw, not a human being standing here. That makes a lot more sense. You could be on PCP and probably not mistake a photo of a clown for a human being standing in front of you. And yet this goober gaslights her and convinces her that that's what it was. So then they go about the rest of their night. And if either one of them was thinking logically, what should have happened there is they both get on the motorcycle and they ride into town and just spend the rest of the night around the normal people. Because there's normal people that invited them to just hang out. So they would have just rode back into town and be like, yep, Airbnb was fucked up. There's some creepy people scaring my girlfriend. Let's go back into town with these normal people and just stay there till the car's repaired in the morning. That would have been the logical thing, because they have a working vehicle that they just used, and it would have immediately ended the movie on the spot. But that's not how it plays out, because no one was thinking. So instead, they just sit there, they listen to some records, and then eventually one of the strangers wearing the mask, like basically the scarecrow mask out of Batman Begins, slams his axe through the door, and that's when it hits the boyfriend like, oh, my girlfriend's not crazy. Oh, we're in danger. So they run into one of the rooms, duck and cover, and just wait for everything to blow over, where one of the strangers with the axe just busts through the door, looks at them, and then walks away. And immediately after he walks away, like maybe 5 seconds, the boyfriend goes and he's like, all right, they're gone. We're safe now. It's actually like an NPC out of like an Oblivion or something, where the second you break line of sight, they're like, oh, must have been the wind. Just cease to exist. So the boyfriend and the girlfriend are like, okay, we need to get some weapons. We need to, like, prep just in case they come back. Because fucking obviously, like, it's not like they just vanished. So they start looking around for weapons to no avail. Eventually, the girlfriend, like, busts off one of the grates. And man, there's another thing I want to point out. The room they were ducking and covering in, there was a window right behind them. They could have just went through the fucking window and then just taken their chances in the forest. But they don't do that. Instead, I also skipped something. When they do get out of the room, they immediately go to the motorcycle. Way too fucking late for that, because now all the strangers are there, and the motorcycle blows up. So, motorcycle's gone, they run back into the house, they go into another room, and that's when the girlfriend takes, like, the air vent grate off the wall, and they both climb in there. Now they're under the house, crawling around, trying not to make noise, and the girlfriend hits her hand on a nail, and a nail goes through. A scene that we saw 1-to-1 and done significantly better in a quiet place. So now she got a nail in her hand and she can't scream because obviously the strangers would hear them. So now she has to deal with that. He takes the nail out and they crawl around under the house and eventually make it to like this little door that opens up under the house. And they open it up, get outside, and immediately start talking at full volume. What the fuck? Like, they've only gone, like, maybe a couple of feet. And they just start talking at full volume. And obviously the strangers can fucking hear that. They just recognized that they needed to be quiet. They couldn't make a peep. She couldn't even scream with a nail going through her hand. And then 2 feet later, it's like, okay, now we can just use our outside voices. It's so dumb. They're so stupid. But what's even stupider is, now they're outside, they could just run through the forest, and their odds are pretty decent there since there's so much land. It'd be hard for just 3 people, 3 strangers, to locate these 2 individuals who are both in fine shape to be running. But instead of just doing that, what they decide to do is go to the shed next door. Which is something obviously the strangers are going to be checking for. The shed. Right? But whatever. Stupid decision. Number 20 already. They go into the shed looking for a weapon. I don't know why they thought there would be a weapon there, because obviously if the strangers are there, they probably would have gotten rid of the weapons, or at the very least been guarding them. So they go into the shed, they start waiting, and the guy goes upstairs and finds a fucking shotgun. So the strangers are stupid too, because they clearly know the property, and there is a stranger in the shed who keeps stalking them, watching them pick up the shotgun and everything, just lets them have the shotgun, and then the guy starts like blasting at some of the strangers, of course missing every shot because it's a horror movie so they can't have good aim. And now the boyfriend and the girlfriend start having a little more confidence, so they're wandering around, they're creeping around the house, and they hear someone banging on the front door. They're like, okay, we've got the jump on him. We've flanked him, and we've got a shotgun now. So the boyfriend says, stay here, I've got this. So he turns the corner, and just like out of Gears of War, he pops out of the corner and fucking blasts him. Literally, like, blind fires the guy. And he's like, I got him. And the girlfriend goes over and looks and is like, damn, that wasn't one of the strangers. You blasted Joe, the owner of the Airbnb. You remember earlier when they called about the fridge? Well, Joe got their message, scoots out here at fucking 4 a.m., starts banging on their door ready to fix a refrigerator, and gets hit with a shotgun in the face. Literally just blows his brains out. And then the guy's like, oh no. Oh, Joe. I'm so sorry, Joe. She's like, no, don't worry. You're trying to protect us. I get it. It's okay. And he's like, wait, his keys. He drove a car here. So they get into Joe's car over his lifeless, dead, fucking cold corpse and start trying to get out of there with the car. But one of the strangers happens to be in his truck, and he starts hitting their car with his truck, and then he pins that car against the tree and his truck, and he keeps hitting it. And then the guy's like, go, save yourself, girlfriend. Go, lady, please, save yourself. I've got this. I'll be okay. And then he remembers that he has a shotgun in the car because he took it with him. And then he gets the shotgun out, and he's ready to shoot the guy, but the stranger's gone. Because he fucking waited until he stopped moving, like he stops hitting his car with his truck to get the shotgun out. Why wouldn't that be the first thing he would do the second he got hit by that truck? The shotgun is next to him. Literally, like, as close to me, as close as I am to my mouse is where the shotgun was. And he gets hit by this truck like 20 times. He just backs it up, like the scene in Austin Powers, backs it forward into his car. Lets this happen like 20 times, and he's like, all right, just get out of here, girlfriend. I'll, save yourself. I'll sacrifice myself for you. Grabs the shotgun, and then when he's finally ready, obviously the stranger's gone because it's been so many hits, and the stranger got bored. But if he had just done that, like maybe 10 seconds sooner, he could have just easily had the cleanest shot ever and killed that guy with the shotgun. So anyway, eventually he crawls out of the car. The lady's running through the forest. She, like, buries herself under some sticks to hide. Then one of the strangers looks down, doesn't see her in the sticks, so the stranger walks away. And like immediately after that stranger leaves, de-aggroes, she gets a cell phone out and calls the police. While the stranger is still, like, maybe at best 5 feet away. She would hear that. But whatever, she gets the call off to the police and then starts running through the forest again, but now the stranger sees her. And the guy's wandering around the forest with a shotgun trying to find the girl. Actually, the guy flanks one of the strangers, puts the shotgun to the back of her head and says, where's my girlfriend? Drop the knife. So the girl drops the knife, doesn't say anything, just starts laughing. And he's like, give me one reason why I shouldn't kill you. And she just keeps laughing and is like shoving the gun in her face. And he doesn't fucking shoot her! This dude just blasted an innocent man in the middle of the night who was coming to repair a refrigerator, and he won't shoot the fucking people that are trying to kill them. It's painful. It's painful. So he doesn't shoot her, and instead he gets knocked out by the guy. The girl gets knocked out by another one of the strangers, and then the strangers end up just stabbing both of them in the house, and then the police show up, and the girl survives and gives us a to be continued for chapter 2. It's so bad. It's so shitty. It's so shitty. There's like so much more I'm sure I could vent about if I really like stopped to think about more of the scenes, but it's just not worth it. It's just bad. And to think that they filmed 2 more of these, that's crazy to me. So yeah, anyway, can't wait for Strangers Chapter 2. If I was to plug this into the moist meter, I'd probably give it like a 15% maybe. Like even that feels a little high for this film, but whatever. It's just not good. That's about it. See ya. P.U. Borderlands movie is a big stinker. Everyone knows it. If you've seen the movie, I'm sorry. If you haven't seen the movie, I'm jealous. It's truly atrocious no matter how you spin it. Every possible thing you could ever hope to enjoy about a film is absent in the Borderlands movie. I think it's unanimously hated across the board. If you find me one human being that says it's a good movie, I'll find you a liar. But I'm not here to just shit on the movie again. I did plenty of that yesterday. I cleaned out my whole colon on Borderlands yesterday. Today I want to talk about the Take-Two CEO's response to the criticism, because it's not getting stellar reviews. There's not exactly glowing reviews. There's not a whole lot of enthusiasm behind what people are witnessing. And I'm using the word witness instead of watched because when you witness something, it's usually something traumatic, like some kind of tragedy, and that is very much what this movie is. So no one's happy about it from what I can tell, for good reason. It's just bad. And now good old goober Strauss-Zelnick has spoken out about this, urging people to give the film a chance. Yeah, it may have debuted at a 0%, then finally up to a 3%, and then eventually even a 6%. Really fucking shooting to the stars there. But hey, don't let that cloud your judgment of it. You know, as Darman taught us, you can't judge a book by its cover. Go give the film a chance. Go waste your money on this movie, says Strauss-Zelnick. Now, Strauss-Zelnick is the Take-Two CEO, and he's no stranger to putting on the squeaky nose. But god damn it, this clown always finds a way to surprise me with just how delusional he is. When asked if the film's success or failure will make any meaningful impact on Take-Two, Zelnick said no. Financially, the film won't make a dent. And then he dropped to his knees in his private jet saying, "Give the film a chance." Let's give the film a chance. A lot of people worked really hard on it. The underlying intellectual property is phenomenal. The cast is amazing. I think the look and feel is really terrific. So let's see what audiences have to say. But to answer your question, no, the performance of the film wouldn't have a financial impact on us or on the franchise one way or another. I am certain Strauss-Zelnick has never touched Borderlands in his life. If he ever even held a game controller, I bet that shit would burn his flesh like a vampire in the sunlight. The guy is just a corporate drone. He is this husk that has human flesh grafted onto it. He's just this being of greed. He doesn't know Borderlands. I doubt he's ever touched the game, and I'm pretty confident he hasn't watched the movie either. In fact, I'm more confident that he hasn't seen the film than I am confident that the sun will rise tomorrow. I also love how he mentions the cast being terrific. How out of touch can you fucking be? That's one of the biggest complaints about the film from everyone with eyes. The casting in this movie makes no sense at all. It's clear the bulk of the budget went with just getting A-list celebrities on board. And they probably had to pay out the wazoo for it because none of them really seem like they want to be there at all. So they probably had to fucking fork over fat doubloons like Scrooge McDuck here to get them to put their name on this pile of dog shit. It is an embarrassing movie, and the actors seem embarrassed to be in it. So they spent all of their money getting Kevin Hart, Jamie Lee Curtis, Cate Blanchett, Jack Black. Jack Black being the only one that tries at all in this film. Everyone else just like fucking sleepwalks through it. That is not something to highlight. It's very clear that the entire strategy for this film wasn't to make a good movie. It was to just try and sell tickets by having big names attached to it. It's the worst tactic ever. It's a certified how many times we have to teach you this lesson, old man moment. There are so many video game adaptations that have come before this that have proven infinite number of times now that this formula doesn't work. If you make an adaptation that doesn't pay respect to the source material and just doesn't even try, it doesn't work. It flops financially. The reception to it is bad. Like, look at the Halo show which recently just got canceled, or the plethora of old video game movies we can all point to over the last couple decades. I don't know what puppeteer is behind the scenes, the goddamn Illuminati over there, that keeps, like, infecting the brains of these Hollywood suits that are convincing them that the way to make adaptation successful is just by getting big name actors on board. Like, it just doesn't work, and they keep doing it. It's actual insanity. They spent $90 million on this star-studded cast for this $5 fart of a film that they produced here. It makes no sense. If you make a bad movie, it doesn't matter how much star power is behind it, it's not going to succeed. I don't know how that lesson hasn't been learned yet. Strauss also reached deep into his bag of tricks here to try and get more asses in the seats by playing the classic, come on guys, people worked really hard on this film, we should all support it. There's a bear shit in the woods, obviously there were some hardworking people behind the scenes on this film. Also, Strauss, since you really seem to care so much about the hardworking team here, you might want to look into why some of them didn't receive proper credit for their work. That's a bit suspicious, that's weird. But anyway, yes, there were people that worked hard on this movie, no doubt. But that doesn't mean that all of a sudden it's immune from criticism. It is not a good movie. And I would wager a guess that a lot of the people that worked hardest on this film were not the ones that were behind the scenes lobbying and pumping their fists saying, "We need Kevin Hart in this movie. We need Cate Blanchett in this movie. Pay fucking hand over fist amount of money to get Jamie Lee Curtis in our Borderlands movie." I imagine there was quite a few people that were actually passionate about Borderlands that were probably fucking crushed with what they had to do on this film, because it's not like they were at the top of the food chain putting together these awful decisions. And I also imagine the VFX department was dreadfully overworked, like Hollywood has become so accustomed to doing here, because ultimately the visuals are really rough. And I never blame the VFX departments for that, because now I've become very well aware of just how cruel the industry is to that entire sector, and my heart actually breaks for them. So I imagine all of the hardest working people were the ones that Strauss doesn't know a single name of. It's so silly to try and deflect by calling in the wambulance about, like, come on, someone worked really hard on this, you can't be mean to it. Like, it doesn't make any sense. It costs $15 to $20 per ticket to see this movie. That's a lot of fucking clams. And it's not worth it at all. And there is nothing wrong with talking about why it's not worth it. He then has the nerve to say that Take-Two is really selective about what games it turns into films, and says that the company doesn't want its imprint on anything unless it's superb. Really, Strauss? You would consider the Borderlands movie superb? This would meet that criteria? He then goes on to just reassure everyone that it's not core to them, you know, they don't need to be doing this because it doesn't have like a massive effect on them, like their bottom line or anything, so it'll probably maintain its approach to only doing so selectively in the foreseeable future. But this article did remind me that there is another project in the work here, a BioShock film at Netflix. If that didn't oh my god, I'm having a full-blown Porky Pig moment here out of pure disgust. If that didn't send shivers down your spine, I don't know what will. A BioShock Netflix film. Following the banger that is the Borderlands movie, what a recipe for success, huh? Who's counting the days, right? Like, get your calendars ready. I can't wait for that fucking thing to drop. That's gonna be a real heater. Throw out all your DVDs and Blu-rays and forget everything you thought you knew about cinema, because it's about to be redefined with the next fucking Take-Two film project here with BioShock coming to Netflix. Oh my bussy trembles in fear at the thought of how bad that might be. If the Borderlands movie is any indication of the quality coming forward, we're in for a real treat with the BioShock film. I'm already just preparing to be really stunned at how bad that one might be. They'll drop like the announcement trailer and it'll reveal that James Corden has been cast as a Big Daddy. It's just so weird to me how we're still getting horrible adaptations. The roadmap is there. We have seen so many good adaptations recently. Like, you can see that all of the success is right there, and they just out of spite choose not to follow that and instead just be like, no, we know better than fans of the property that we're adapting. In fact, we know the direction that people actually want to see it to make it accessible to all audiences. And then they do what they did 20 years ago when every adaptation was trash. Let's all point and laugh at the absolute floundering it's doing in the box office right now. It's open to $4 million so far. On a $100 million budget, that is super rough. Unsurprisingly, people aren't just blindly going to see it because of the A-list actors in it. They're not just zombies flooding in the door to watch this pile of shit just because those names are attached to it. It seems like you actually have to make a pretty decent movie too to get people to get in the seats. What an absolute clunker. 4 million is significantly lower than I would have ever imagined for this film, and I'm actually super proud that people aren't just going to see it just because of the title of it or the actors in it. It really isn't worth the time or money. So it's very reassuring to see that it's doing so poorly here, because it, under no circumstances, should succeed. It's purely a cash grab that isn't grabbing much cash right now. They actually would have made more money if they just compiled every cutscene from the Borderlands series into a movie and released it for free on YouTube. They probably would have made more off just the fucking AdSense from that, as opposed to this $100 million theatrical catastrophe. But yeah, don't listen to Strauss. It's not worth giving the film a chance. The movie's just bad. That's about it. See ya.